Hello, 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 everyone. This is the Reverend Tanika Steens, the Mindful Coach. And today on Mind Your Business, my guest is David Green. He is the author of a book about you and pictures of your soul. He studied music composition and has been recording and composing for decades. He worked with some of the most famous names in the music and is an award winning film producer. For a livelihood, he invents and patents technology to sell to other companies. And today we get to hear about what David does. And for over 30 years, David has become a renowned international teacher, speaker, and performer. He now lives in Israel with his wife and 8 kids and 16 grandchildren. He is truly blessed. But today he's blessing us on Mindful Intentions, Nurture, and Drive Your Business. Welcome, David. Thank you for being a guest. Tell us a
Thank
little
you.
bit more about yourself, who you are, what you do, and exactly why you do it.
Okay, I'll do my best. I'm from Toronto, Canada originally, and I grew up since I've been 16 years old at least, writing songs, and my whole emphasis in life was to try to be successful in the music industry since I was a kid. I had this strange view of reaching the age of 20 as if I was going to be over the hill if I didn't make it. I wanted to be so successful by then. And I worked so hard. And unfortunately, what happened was while I was working so hard towards that goal, I became somewhat disconnected from myself because when your external goal becomes everything we're trying to work on, you can lose track of who you really are inside. And so I was running so fast to be successful in the business. And by 18, I was in Hollywood recording an album. And there was a tremendously talented producer, arranger that I was working with named Gene Page. And he won numerous Grammy Awards in the past. And he asked me if I would accept his Grammy that year. And I'm like, I'm this 18-year-old, and I'm like just trying to rub shoulders with the right people. And that's a great way to move my way up in the business, right? So for sure. And he had a limousine pick me up, and I rented a tuxedo, and I'm heading down the highway in Los Angeles, ready to accept my award. Like as if it was mine. That's you have to be a little delusional to be successful. And and as I'm heading down, I don't come from a religious background at all, but I think that's like the first time I sincerely prayed to God that he should not win, because if he were to win, there was a high risk of me going up there, accepting the award, and forgetting his name or like
Oh, no.
spacing out some other way. I got so nervous, and thank God he did not win. I never told him that, but what happened was after the Grammys was a very big gathering of all the people in the industry. And so what happened was I come from more of a jazz R&B background, and in that from that artistic background, you're not supposed to sacrifice your artistic integrity at all in order to be successful in the pop market. So there were very few people that I knew who had succeeded at doing that. So not only was I trying to be successful, but I was also trying to do it without, sacrificing my artsiness, which is a very dangerous thing to try to do because it's very hard. But there was one musician I saw there who was like my idol, and he was someone who broke into the pop market, had a smash hit, and he was one of my favorite jazz musicians of all time. And there he was, my idol, and I looked at him, and I had this strange idea go through my head because he looked so depressed. And I had this vision like of my whole life in front of me, and I said to myself, is this really what I want? I'm running a million miles an hour to become this person, and this person does not look happy, and I better stop and figure out what I truly want to make me happy, and then use my music as an expression of that inner happiness. And that was all, like everything I just said was really within a flash of a second. It was like God giving me this like clarity that was just needed in order for me to step back and say, hey, you know what? 18-year-olds do other things at that stage of life. You have to develop yourself as a person, develop your self-esteem, develop your awareness of God, develop all kinds of things that I was missing out on because I was outside of the box, outside of the system. I decided I would go to college and learn music composition more for the sake of just doing what 18-year-olds do, as opposed to that I was so desperate to go to music school because I didn't see that much benefit of it. But I studied music composition, and there I saw all these other people trying to be that celebrity that wasn't very happy. They're all musicians trying to be this, without sacrificing the artistic integrity, be successful and everything. And I saw through it because I've been there already. And I decided, you know what, I gotta find myself. And this, after about 3.5 years of college, I decided to go find myself in Israel, because as a Jew, I felt my home was there, and I felt that the people who were religious there would be very sincere and committed, and I wouldn't have this watered down Judaism, which was what I was exposed to as a kid, which is why it never spoke to me. And I came to Israel, and I lived in an apartment overlooking the Western Wall and the Temple Mount, and I was so inspired. And what happened was my music started to flourish. It started to flow so naturally. It was no longer about being an artsy artist. It was about being me and allowing something very true within me to come out and share it with the world, and share it with myself, and share it with God. And so that process of discovering who I was the best music school I could possibly imagine, and also the best school for life for me to start looking around and say, hey, how did we get here? What is this world for? Am I here for a particular individual purpose? And that became my focus: individuality. Individuality, because God put me in this world to achieve something, and I want to know what that is, because there's nothing that can make a person happier than knowing that they're doing the mission that they were created to do in this world. And so I was on a search for that mission. And it took time. And I believe actually even every stage of life has its mission. Somehow the colors of your way you look at the world change when you become a parent, when you become a grandparent. Each stage has its opportunities, and some people are living in the past, and they if you dwell on the past, emotionally, in terms of your excitement for things, and you're not getting that at a later stage in life, you feel like a failure. But what I learned to do was to say, okay, each stage of life, what am I here to achieve? And I spent years teaching about God, teaching people about their soul. And that's what brought me to writing the books that I wrote. And I've got 2 albums. One's called Journey to the Real You, and one's called Empty Spaces, which is based on more my second book. The lyrics are all intertwined within the book, so they're all one project that I call the Real You Project. And that's really that whole process and education experience of teaching and everything is what's really brought me here today, because it seems like you're very much into trying to help people discover who they are and their identities and how they can express that in the world. So anything I can share with you, I'd be happy to do, because it seems like we're on the same page.
Amazing. I believe we always are in this marketing era of what sells and what's hot and what these brands are. But individuality, we are a brand. My husband had preached a sermon about that, about how we take precedence in these things that we have, like our phones, and we think that these are such hot commodities, but we're the commodity, and we don't understand that we're the biggest asset in the world, that God created. We are that. And he always says that we are thinking of these people that create these things, and like the iPhone or cars and all these things that are attractive, and we put so much value into them, but we don't put that same value into the greatest creation on earth, which is us. And
Right.
being able to know who you are a brand. And your personality, yourself, who you are truly is what we need to connect to. And I love everything that you said about being able to find your true self. I wrote that down. Finding your true self is a process. And
Right.
we go through different stages. And a lot of times there are people that are 90 years old that haven't figured that out yet. And so for you to figure that out at a young age and to be able to connect with your inner self and say, you know what, I don't want to lose myself in what I'm doing. I want to be real to who I am and go off and explore that. That's great because a lot of times we don't take the time or the opportunity to do so. So I thank you so much for sharing that because you're right. That's what I want people to understand and to know that we all
Well,
have a purpose and it's a process.
right. And in fact, to emphasize that point, there's this principle that when you read something in the Bible, the first time a word shows up, it has a special meaning that teaches you about that word for the rest of the Bible. And if you think of what were the very first words said to our father Abraham, the very first words have to be very significant because they're the very first ones. And those very first words were the words lech lecha, which means go to yourself. The for Abraham to become the father of the Jewish people, he first had to go on a mission, one of going, which is a departure from the environment that he was brought up in, which was one of idol worship. And he even smashed his father's idols, which he was saying, well, like maybe they smashed themselves, and it showed that obviously they didn't do it, and he had to remove himself from the negative influences that were around him. But then the second word is lecha, to yourself. Well, what do you mean a journey to yourself? So that's exactly what my whole project is, a journey to the real you. That's the title of my first album, Journey to the Real You. Lech, go to yourself. So what I teach people to do is do both of those things. One is lech, which is get rid of distractions. We are so distracted from our inner selves because not only are the messages very confusing and causing us a damage in the way we look at the world, because there are other people's view of the world that we're sort of made to feel like we have to buy into, and you don't have to buy into it. It's not you. So that's one element of it. And the other element of it is that there's so much information flying through our minds at every moment with our phones. And, I watch younger people on their phones and I can't believe how fast they move their thumbs to type, and they're flicking this way to Instagram, to TikTok, to this and this and that. And that is so distracting from their inner selves because their brains are involved in the mechanism, the external mechanism. And so therefore, if we can learn how to quiet down that noise, so then there's an inner self to be discovered. So that's why lech is very important, to depart from all that noise. And then lecha, to yourself, there's actually a proactive path that a person can take, which is what my first book is about, a book about you, which is all about how to discover the colors of your soul based on certain Kabbalistic principles of attributes of God that we have inside of ourselves. And he gives us a different balance of those types of colors. And so if a person could reach down inside and discover what color their soul is, and it may be a combination of what's called chesed and gevura, which is kindness and restraint, or tiferet, which is harmony. These are different attributes that God has that he gave us within ourselves. So I teach people how to discover what they are. And along with that comes strengths and weaknesses, which helps for self-acceptance. Because if you know that a certain type of weakness comes with, let's say, a person who's a chesed personality, a kind personality, they love people, They love beautiful scenery. They're often artists. So those people usually are going to be late when you want to meet them, because they're the type of people who love people so much that they're going to hug everybody on the way, and it's going to make them late. And you say, well, if they love people so much, why are they making me wait at the coffee shop, right? But it's because they can't. They have a very, very difficult time adjusting to time. Time itself is a very difficult thing, because the love they have for others is so strong. So if somebody it finds himself late or unorganized or something, they'll say, oh gosh, I'm so unorganized, I'm so bad about this. But if they know that that's part of the package that comes with being a very people oriented, kind person, so then they realize, oh wow, that's part of the package, and I should work on it by adding one of the other attributes, which is restraint, called gvura. And that makes it so that my kindness doesn't deplete me of all my energy, and rather I create a sense of balance. So the more we know about the strengths and weaknesses that come with these type of personalities, the more we can appreciate ourselves, and then also appreciate others who are different, because God gave them their personalities as well, which means there's tremendous potential in people who are different than us. In fact, in my own marriage, my wife and I are opposite personalities, but we're held together by a common vision of the life we want to build. So therefore, we're both contributing different pieces of the puzzle to something that's much higher than us. And because it's higher than us, then the love becomes stronger and stronger as we accept each other's differences and see how they contribute to making something work on a much higher level. It's much higher than just a matter of a love relationship. It's a love relationship that works to create a loving relationship with our Father in heaven. Together, we're working on the same vision of our Father in heaven. And we want that together, and we want that to share that with our kids and with our family and the community, but do it with a sense of balance and knowing what our strengths and specific areas of contribution are.
Oh, that was wonderful. As I'm sitting here listening to you, I always say this podcast is not just to help other people, but it definitely is helping me. I mean, I love everything that I have gotten from being on this podcast in the last 2 years. And everything you said just spoke to my soul, because I think of my husband and myself, and he's very laid back and quiet and reserved, and I'm more raw all over. But we do have that commonality of a higher purpose in our balance. And I thought about you when you said if someone has a love of people and they're often late, and we laugh sometimes because it's like my husband, when it's time to get somewhere, it's like, oh God, we're gonna be late. But now it helped me to understand, it gave me a better understanding of that personality. And, for 26 years, I've lived with him and I know that about him, but I didn't know this aspect. And so that
Right.
gave me another layer of him and his personality to be more accepting and more understanding of he does love people and he does care. And when he shows up, he gives his all. But along the way, sometimes it might be some distractions before we get there, to
Right.
get us there. So I thank you for opening my eyes to that and helping me to see more clearly on how to understand that type personality.
Well, if you go to my website, there's actually a personality quiz that you can take that will show you the amount of each of those primary personality colors that you have. And then my book has a chapter on each one of them, and it lists all the positive attributes and the negative attributes that you're likely to have to challenge yourself with.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean we retire, or we accept that as being something that we have to live with for the rest of our lives. We can combat the very negative attributes, but when you know where they're coming from, it's so much easier to do so, because it's accepting yourself with those weaknesses that are there to challenge you and to try to help you create a balance and offer to other people as well.
Absolutely. And I was thinking also about when you said you looked at that person and they were depressed and you said to yourself, is this what I want? And you want to do music and you wanted to be in the industry, but music wasn't necessarily who you were. Can you speak more about that? Because I think a lot of times people think that what they do defines who they are. And is there is there a difference in what you do and who you are, or are they the same?
Oh, they're very different. It's so important. It's actually interesting. I'll give you a story that illustrates this. When Herbie Hancock is one of my favorite jazz musicians of all time, he was visiting Israel, and I had the privilege of hosting him. And I lived in the old city, and his manager was a friend of a guy that I was writing some songs with. And we spent the day together. We prayed at the Western Wall together. And on the way to a master class he was giving at one of the music schools here, I asked him a question. I said, let's say, God forbid, that you were to lose your fingers and couldn't play piano again. Would you have what to live for? And he said, David, I've been thinking about that question for a long time. And I finally can tell you that I do have what to live for. And that means that he was able to separate his greatness in his artistic expression from his inner self. Those are two very different things. And if, God forbid, I was not able to play piano again in my life, I should be a happy person. Why? Because that inner self has to be the essence of who I am. When God created man, he breathed a pure soul into us. In fact, the soul has 5 levels to it, and the 5 levels correspond with the 5th letter in the Hebrew alphabet, which is Hey. And if you hear when I say the word Hey, the sound of it is breathing. Hey, right? And it says that God breathed like the letter Hey, the 5 levels of the soul. He breathed that into us. And therefore, the essence of who we are is that soul, that divine soul. And that divine soul is pure. And no matter what someone says or what someone does, including yourself, even if you bash yourself, there's a purity of a divine soul within us that is the essence of who we are. But he also gave us something called an animal soul. And an animal soul is there to, for one, challenge you so that you have free will in order to say, you know what? I'm not going to follow the negative voices of the animal soul that's trying to make me act like an animal. On the other hand, the animal soul can be a tremendous tool for us, because if you have a horse and a rider, the rider can ride that horse, use that animal to travel tremendous distances and carry loads and do all kinds of very productive physical things. So I want to use that animal soul to be able to achieve things in this physical world. We're not created as angels. God wanted us to live in the physical world. So I can use my animal soul. But if the horse takes the lead and the rider loses control, so then that rider is a victim of the animal soul as opposed to being the rider of the animal soul. So in our lives, we have to be careful to make sure that we always identify with the divine soul, because that's the essence of who we are. And then that divine soul can use the world around us to elevate our soul and elevate the world around us. And therefore, my music is not me. My music is a tool that my divine soul is utilizing with my animal soul, in fact, because it involves physical activity. And that enables me to lift the physical world up. That's what sacrifices were in the temple, where we actually brought an animal onto the sacrifice. It was taking something physical and elevating it to a higher purpose, a higher level, and it created a tremendous uplift of the soul through that process of taking something physical and elevating it. And that's what we do every time we do anything, whether it's eating food. Eating food should not be just indulging in a physical activity. It should be something that's preceded by a prayer, thanking God for the food that we have. And that's injecting a spirituality into that physical thing. Even in the bedroom, marital relations in the Torah, in the Judaism, is considered the holy of holies. That's the holiest place, where, because there's so much physical pleasure that's there, that means if we utilize it properly, that means that intimacy, it becomes an expression of love between a husband and wife, and our Father in heaven as well. He gave us the ability to enjoy. It's not to be wasted. It's to be something that unites us and elevates us. But obviously, the animal soul is very much involved. But that's where we take control of it. But unfortunately, so many people in the world have had their animal soul rule them, and therefore that's why there's a lot of sexual perversion, where people allow their animal soul to be the ruler, as opposed to the rider.
Wow, you are touching on some good stuff here. I mean, I I don't know that people really take the time to stop and be mindful of who they are and what's within them, because like you said, we get so caught up in the world and what the world expects and what we're supposed to offer, and that's the animal side taking over and leading us, when we can pull back the reins on that, right? I know in 2020 I had a mental breakdown, and at that point it was where I had to come to a point of understanding who I am and what my sole purpose was. And that's what led me to this podcast, even because I knew that there was something greater than me that was leading and guiding me. And I knew that all my life. But for some reason, I was thinking I was doing it on my own, right? And when I came to the realization, once my mind was at a place of no control, I realized I had to surrender. And when I surrendered is when I became the most free in my life, right? When I was able to accept truly who I am and not be ashamed and not be afraid to actually walk in my true calling. I remember I heard a voice saying to me, you have to fully walk in your call in order to be your true self. And I held back for so long because I'm afraid of what people might say or what they might think, or where I came from and who do you think you are. And once I let all of that go, and it was like I don't care anymore, like you said, it was like a peace and a freedom of knowing who I truly am within. And it didn't matter because now that can reflect out. But before I was just reflecting out, not truly personifying what was within. And I love the fact that you speak to the soul and you are true to the self, because I think we are doing ourselves a disservice and wasting our breath and our life that we have each moment that we're alive, not living up to our soul purpose, no matter what that is. And we all have one. We just
Right.
have to be able to connect to it.
It's interesting. And one of the most profound lines I heard you just say was surrender. That is something which is very much a part of the meditative prayer process that we work on a lot. And as I mentioned before, there's 5 levels of the soul. What people call mindfulness is very much in tune with the first level of the soul, called nefesh, and that's a matter of connecting with the nefesh, is connected to the blood. It says in the Bible in a number of places, dam hu hanefesh. The blood is the nefesh. That level of the soul resides in the blood. And that's why when you close your eyes and just sort of listen to your soul, you feel it throughout your body because it's flowing with the blood. That's the nefesh side. And animals have a nefesh as well. It's just a lower level nefesh. It's an animal nefesh. But then if you meditate after becoming aware of your body and your breathing and all that level of the nefesh, then you can enter into a new level, which is called ruach. And ruach is more spirit. It's more of an emotional connection to something higher. And you enter into a place which is what I call empty spaces, which is the title of my second album, because the title song is a meditation that takes you from the nefesh level to the ruach level. And in the ruach level, you have to surrender. It's all about letting go, which is another song I have called Let It All Go, and surrendering. and you enter into this realm where it's like very dark. You are almost seeing a taste of infinity. Infinity is something which is something we are scared to experience, but yet if we surrender ourselves to it, then even though it seems like we're traveling very far away, we're actually traveling closer and deeper into ourselves. That's why we say that somebody who is humble has the greatest self-esteem. Moses was considered the most humble people of all time, and yet he was the leader of the Jewish people throughout the desert. And it was only because he was humble that God could speak through him, because he made himself like dust of the earth, and therefore he became a voice for God to be expressed in this world. And it wasn't that he was God; he was only a mouthpiece for God, and therefore we ourselves, the more we can allow ourselves to become humble, the more we are actually going to get in touch with our true identity. And it's only when our egos get in the way that we worry too much about how other people are going to perceive us, because we want to look good in the eyes of others as opposed to in the eyes of God. And therefore, nullifying the ego is the greatest place to actually get what the ego is looking for, which is greatness. But the greatness doesn't come from faking it. It comes from being as real as possible with the fact that you're a soul given to you as a gift to work, to do your job in this world before you move to the next one with everything that you gathered together while you were living your lifetime here.
Absolutely. That, oh my goodness, that is some good stuff. I absolutely am enjoying this conversation because, again, I feel like whenever God is speaking to me, he does it through this podcast. When he has a message for me and something that I need to learn. And I'm learning a lot, especially going hand in hand with our ministry and the walk that we're on right now. And whenever I'm having a conversation with God and asking him, okay, God, am I at the right place? Am I where you want me to be? Am I doing the right thing? Let me understand what I need to do or where I need to be. I have someone like you come on and help me to see that. And I was listening to a song the other night and it says lift your hands up, but I thought it said look at your neighbor. And so the song says we give glory to God. It's by Ty Tribbett. We give glory to God, lift your hands up. And I thought he said give glory to God, look at your neighbor. And so I told my husband, he was listening, and he goes, well, you could add that in there. And I said, well, the reason why I thought he said look at your neighbor is because God said, when you see, well, Jesus said, when you see me, you see God, right? So when you see your neighbor, when you see someone else, you see God. And you actually have to be able to see that person and look at them. And then it's a reflection of who you are. And sometimes we don't like what we see, right? In other
Right.
people, because it's only a reflection of things in us that we may feel like we need to work on or that we need to go deeper with. And it's scary sometimes when we actually have to face ourselves and face the truth. But when we do, and we take off those layers of all these things that we've learned that were wrong or that were in the wrong way and that are unjustified because it's not giving glory to God, when we start to remove those things and we start to see the truth, it's like they said that the pills coming off your eyes, the scabs coming off your eyes or whatever, and it kind of hurts. But once you get out of that and you start to walk in your truth, it feels good and
Right.
it's refreshing. And so I hope someone today is listening that understands that no matter where they are or what they're going through, whatever is calling them to something higher, that they can walk in that trueness of light in themselves. Can you speak to how they can begin to do that?
Yeah, first of all, I think it's very important to point out that for you, a major transition came from when you had a mental breakdown. Uh, and that's actually quite common, that when a person is at a very low place and you're in a very dark place, if you light a candle in the dark, that can light up a tremendous amount of space. If you take the same candle and hold it up to the sun, you won't see it because it's drowned out by the light of the sun. So in Mishle, forget what that's translated in English, Proverbs maybe. It says that the soul of man is the candle of God, which means that you have this flame that's burning, and if you're in a very dark place, then sometimes you can see that flame much more than if you're in a very bright place.
Oh, yeah.
And therefore, people who are going through a depression, people who have lost a lot of money or have lost a relationship, they, if they knew how much of an opportunity that pain could actually open up a door to, it would be a tremendous gateway to spirituality. In my book called Pictures of Your Soul, there's a section there that talks about this very process. And just in brief, there's two passages that a person should actually take simultaneously as best. One is a contemplation of how incredible creation is, and look at what you are, how every cell in your body has a function to it. The DNA of your body is communicating messages throughout your body. Your mind is an incredible tool. Science is only beginning to understand, just scratching the surface to understand how a brain works and how we communicate to each other, and so much information. Just driving a car and making a turn, you have so much information that's passing through your head that you don't even realize, that in order to judge the distance between this car and that car and how fast something else is moving, and all that is going on. And the more a person contemplates on that and on the beauty and genius of the creation of the world, then that wakes up within them a certain awareness. But there's another type of another path of awareness, which is one of recognizing that there is a sixth sense. We always talk about five senses, but there's another sense, which is an inner awareness of God. That inner awareness, you don't have to philosophize in order to get in touch with it. If you allow yourself to listen inside and hear the voice of your soul and the voice of God speaking within you, then you are able to wake up that awareness. And it's often heard when you're in a very dark place, like the analogy of the candle. There's the awareness of God and your own sense of who you are and spiritual identity and the color of your soul. All those ideas are things which are experiential as well. And that's why some people, they're critical of others. Why did they become religious? They were just going through an emotional difficulty, so that's the only place they could go. But it's on the contrary, that emotional difficulty enabled them to have a wake-up call to who they really are. And then it's good once to go through that emotional process to then use your more intellectual side to see and to solidify it, because really we want to incorporate a nice healthy balance of intellectual awareness with emotional awareness. But unfortunately, so many people shut out the emotional awareness as if it's not real, but it's very real. And once we have it, then we should examine it, make sure it's authentic, but we should never close our eyes to the beauty that can come out of a very, very dark place. I have a song called Candle in the Night, which is all about how a candle can make like a shining face glow. And it's really centered around the holiday of Hanukkah, which we celebrate lighting candles, and it's all represents the revealing of the hidden soul. And that's something that I myself have gone through. I've been to hell and back with depression in my life as well. And it's always surrendering and understanding that God is with me in that very low place as much as he's with me in a high place. And by coming to that awareness, that in itself is very healing. No longer running after all these other things. Just I'll tell you, I once once had a seizure, and I was rushed to the hospital. And at first, they didn't see any problem, and then they found a tumor in my brain, and I was very nervous about it, and didn't know how much longer I had to live. And I started, like, all my big ideas about how I was going to save the world became secondary to how much I want to experience my life now, how much I want a relationship with my children and with my wife, and how much I should treasure every single moment of this life. And thank God the MRIs eventually showed that it was benign. I still have to have a medication, which is, tires me out, but that's part of the package that I was given. But it's an incredible transition that took place in my life by thinking that maybe I only had a few months to live. And suddenly the things that really mattered became much more the center of my life. And the challenge that I try to face in my life now is, even though, thank God, I have so much blessing in my life, it's also extremely important to constantly stay as in touch as possible with the type of realization I had back then, when I thought maybe I only had a few months left to live, because that awareness is still alive. It's still a truth that should be carried with us, so that we treasure every moment. And yes, I run an organization for mental health here in Israel, to help people cope with mental health crisis. I'm writing books, I'm teaching, and doing all these external things that I believe very much in. But every day I pray 3 times a day, and it's a requirement to readjust, realign your values to make sure they're consistent with what we were taught through the rabbis and through our sages, through the Talmudic teachings of what is ultimately truly important. And therefore, I fuel myself with those ideas throughout my day, in order to maintain that type of awareness, which came naturally when I was where I thought my life was going to be cut short. And that's something that I think that people should learn to appreciate, that every day is an incredible gift. And it's not just an awareness of that on an intellectual level, but we should wake up and feel that as well.
Absolutely. It's being a carefree person and someone that's like easygoing and free spirit and just like, I don't understand sometimes how everybody's not that way. And it's not that everybody's not that way, they just haven't got there yet. And so we can't, like you said, people are who they are, and we can't get mad at someone for being who they are. But how do we get into the position of, we can't help everybody, we can't save the world, but how do we get into the position to not be judgy, and to be at a point of, well, you should do this, but be in a more kind, caring aspect of helping people see their potential? Because sometimes when you try to help someone, you think you're helping them or encouraging them, and truthfully, you're doing the opposite of that based off of what you think or believe. But how can we do it in a way that doesn't come across like we're judging them or trying to make them change, but actually trying to help them to be their better true self?
I think the first thing is to sort of step back and feel their pain, because if you feel their pain, then now you have like a little piece of them in you to talk to. If you talk to them like a foreigner, they are just going to think, you don't know what I'm going through. And if a person's behavior is inappropriate, if they're not living up to a certain moral standard that you believe they should, and they probably believe they should as well, but they're just caught up with the animal soul pulling them away. We have to recognize that we are fragile, that falling is something that is in a sense natural if we allow it to happen, or if God put us in a challenging situation, like people who are brought up in an abusive environment. It's very, very likely that they're going to have certain types of anger that are expressed as a result of the troubles they went through growing up. So you have to look at the whole picture and say, wow, if I, God forbid, were growing up with what they're going through, where would I be? And try to feel the pain and be with them at the place which is where they're at now. Don't try to rush them ahead 20 steps. Right now, their success is a tiny step forward. And if they can take that tiny step forward, then they are 100% successful for that particular day. And then they take another tiny step forward, and that becomes 100% successful for the next day. And if you can speak to where they're at that time and love them in the process, you can do tremendous amount for people. But you have to be cautious not to become completely depleted within their problem. You still have to know it's you helping them. Otherwise, what happens is people can consume all your emotional energy and depend upon you, and they become like a leech that's always pulling out your energy. So there's a balance of showing, on one hand, that you feel their pain, but you're feeling their pain as a different person who's there to help them, but that you have your own life as well. Otherwise, what happens is you'll only be able to help one or two people in your life, and you won't have the energy to help others. And when you help them only to a certain point, then you're actually giving them more, because you're encouraging the independence that they need in order to be able to grow with a sense of self and to see that they can actually achieve what they have to do. And if you're holding their hand the whole time like a baby, they won't learn. So yes, you have to feel their pain. You have to speak to where they're at that particular time, but you also have to be yourself as an independent being at the same time.
Absolutely, David. You are awesome. I thank you so much for sharing this time with us and sharing your knowledge and just your energy and letting us into your space. I feel, for some reason, I feel like I'm where you are right now. Just
Huh.
I feel like I'm in that space, and I see where you're coming from, and I get it. And I've learned so much today about finding your true self in the process of it. I know I often talk about it and I teach this, but this podcast, this episode today has helped me to understand how I can go deeper. But if people want to know more about you and how they can go deeper with you and learn from you, how can they do that?
So I have a website which is realuproject.com, and on there there's my music. My music can also be found on Spotify, Apple Music, all the different streaming services under David H. Green. I have two books that can be purchased on Amazon. One was just actually re-released by a company called Morgan James out of New York. It's a very big publisher. They wanted me to rewrite my book, a book about you, to make it more understandable, more accessible to a general audience, not just the religious Jewish community, but to a general audience. So that's there now, a book about you. And then Pictures of Your Soul, also it's on Amazon. But I offer a 30% off on my book. If you give me a code, I'll put that in, and your listeners can go from my website and buy it. If we can do the word mindful if you want.
Yes.
Okay, so your listeners can go on my website, Real You Project, and under Pictures of Your Soul, if you click buy there, not from the Amazon one, but from the page there, and put in mindful, you'll get 30% off on the book. And I just hope people will read the book. that book, Pictures of Your Soul, was written to try to make the soul much more of a tangible things to relate to. So it's got a lot of pictures. It's got beautiful pictures of people in prayer that a photographer, Moshe Sloss, who lives in the old city of Jerusalem, he takes pictures of people praying at the Western Wall. So woven throughout the book are these stunning photographs. So I don't want it to be a coffee table book though. So because what is written in there is based on a Hasidic masterpiece called the Tanya, which is all about helping a person get in touch with their soul and understand what the soul is, and dealing with the struggles that we talked about today. And so please, I don't make money off of this. Thank God I make my living doing other things. But I really want to be able to share this wisdom with the world. So Real You Project has the links to all of those opportunities.
Absolutely. And would you like to share your social links with us as well, how they can find you on social media?
The truth is, my Facebook, if you look under David Green, I forget like how to direct them there, but it should show up um, at real.u.project on Instagram. But I still think the best place, the cleanest place to get clear information is actually from realuproject.com.
Gotcha. Well, David, I thank you so much. I'm definitely going to go out there because I know that that book can help me in my work as well. And it's definitely some things that I've been working on. And I think I can learn a lot more from you through your work as well. And I always believe whoever comes on this podcast, it's a divine intervention and a divine connection. So I thank you for making that connection and being on Mindful Intentions, Nurture and Drive Your Business, because you're very mindful, you're very intentional, you nurture and you drive your business as well as others, and your business isn't just your music, but it's you, and you've been very intentional about making sure you're being true to yourself as well as to others. And so I commend you in your work and all that you do, and I know that there is so much more greater things that lie ahead of you just based off of this conversation today. So I look forward to engaging with you more, and hopefully maybe even having you on the podcast and collaborating on some things with you, because I know that I can learn some things from you. And a lot of times people look at religion and backgrounds and think that they don't believe what I believe, or they are doing this, or and I do that. You know what? When we take all of that away and we realize we serve one true living God that loves us and created us for his glory, then we can come together and be more kinder and work together in that aspect. And I hope someone learned that today. I hope someone looked at this conversation and said, wow, he is coming from one place, she's coming from another place, but together they are doing the Lord's work. And so that's what we are trying to promote and trying to show, that we all have a call and a purpose, and he wants us to come together, and he wants us to lift each other up so that we can be as one. And thank you for showing that today on this show.
My pleasure. And people should feel comfortable. On my website is my email. They can email me directly if there's questions or anything that they think I can help with. And I'd be happy to come back on another time and talk about other areas of spiritual awareness and development.
Absolutely. Because I'm like, I've got some new words that I've learned today, and I'm working on a sermon, and I'm thinking this is going to help me with that. So I appreciate you and your knowledge. Is there anything else you would like to leave with our guests today before we jump off of here?
No, I think just that I appreciate that you appreciate what I have to offer, and that I hope that you'll share it with as many people as possible, and keep up the great work.
Thank you so much. Hang out with me for a minute while I get us out of here. Thank you, everyone, for watching today. And if you aren't able to see this broadcast live, then you can catch it on the podcast, but you won't be able to see David's beautiful face and get to see us interact with one another. But just being able to hear the words and the voice can touch your soul. I want to leave you with this. Finding your true self is a process. It takes time, but we all were created with a purpose. So go to yourself and find out, do you have what to live? That's going to stick with me. What to live. Not your why, but your what. See, we hear about the why all the time, but do we ever discuss the what? Let's know that it's all about the blood and the spirit, helping us to be aware, the contemplation of how incredible creation is, and recognizing the sixth sense, the inner awareness of God. Listen inside to hear the voice of God so you can be at peace within. Thank you for listening today. Thank you for taking the time out, David, for coming on here. Thank your wife and your kids and grandkids for sharing you with us and with the world. And may God continue to bless you on your journey. And remember, as always, you were created with a purpose. Now, go be great. Thank you.
Thank you.